scheduled to take 45 minutes, and we will have about 15 minutes for question and answer. You may post your questions at any time during the presentation in the chat or question dialog in the GoToMeeting control panel. Please feel free to enter those as they come into your head so that we have time at the end to answer all of those. Again, my name is Ryan Suydam. I am the Director of Operations and co-founder of the Client Feedback Tool. We launched our company about 10 years ago and grew it out of an architectural firm in Raleigh, North Carolina. So we do certainly understand the project delivery business all of you are in, with a particular focus on engineering, architecture, construction professionals. The vast majority of our work with our clients is in the AEC space. What we're going to talk about today are several stories of how peers of yours all across the country, and several that are outside of the country as well, have been utilizing an effective, ongoing client feedback process to increase sales, build loyalty, and enhance their firm culture. We really want to help you understand that these techniques work best when the client feedback process is about the client and really focused on enhancing the client experience. Client feedback works best when it's gathered early, often, and includes the right people. And a great feedback strategy promotes a consistent follow-up plan to turn that data into knowledge, wisdom, and action. I will begin with a brief overview of some best practices we've curated over the last decade on how firms like yours can most effectively engage clients with an effective feedback process. We'll then take a look at several stories of how individual organizations have applied those best practices and seen some great results coming out of that. As I said already, we were established in 2004. We've worked with over 300 AEC firms, as well as legal and other project delivery organizations. We've measured over 50,000 unique client relationships, and most of our work has been focused on the ENR 500 firms. You see a few of our clients. Some of these may or may not be represented in the stories I'm sharing today. For the agenda, we'll talk about why feedback matters, best practices of how it works, a more detailed case study of one firm, as well as a few highlights from other organizations. And we'll wrap up with a basic overview of the strategies and the Q&A session. So why does this matter? What are some of the things you're going to see today, some of these success stories? One, you can't manage what you don't measure. Since managing and understanding how to deliver an exceptional client experience is really the key differentiator between you and the other firms your clients could work with, it's critical that we understand best how to measure and manage those relationships. We do this because what's measured tends to improve automatically. The focus you place on it tells everyone on your staff that this is important, so they focus on it as well. When you get everybody focused very much on managing the client experience, you'll see practical bottom line benefits. You will improve quality, both of the work product and of the service delivery. You will reduce risk because your clients will be more engaged, you have more open lines of communication, and that will all work to minimize your exposure. You'll also do the work more efficiently, you'll win more work, it'll be more lucrative and fun work to do, and that's all going to go right down to your bottom line. You'll also find that there are some really interesting aspects regarding the human processes inside your organization. Feedback overwhelmingly is very positive and affirming. It promotes respect, appreciation, and loyalty. between your clients and your staff, between leaders and the people that work for them. You really enable this entire ecosystem to exist of acknowledgement and recognition for the work that has been done well, as well as a real team effort and focus and interest on what are the things that we can do better. Some of you may also be ISO 9001, that is a quality certification. Feedback is actually a requirement to maintain that quality certification. So if any of you are very focused on those quality requirements, you'll find that feedback satisfies that as well. From a basic best practice approach, we want to talk about getting feedback when you have time to take action on it. I deliver several presentations where I address this in more detail. But rather than waiting to the end of a project to collect feedback, a simple best practice is to get feedback before the project is over. No client wants a better project next time. They want a better project this time. So whether you ask 8 times or you ask 1 time, the sooner you get some feedback, the more opportunity you have to take action on it. Not only do you find issues and address them before they become big, but it's amazing how many times you discover a success you didn't know about. And you can perpetuate that success and keep that high value service going for the remainder of the project, increasing your perceived value in your client's mind. It's also relevant to understand that feedback is a game everybody can play. And rather than letting feedback exist only at one level in the organization, perhaps it's something that marketing does, the firms that really utilize feedback effectively engage everybody in the feedback process. Everyone that's interacting with clients and talking with clients on a regular basis has an opportunity to look at that relationship and improve it. And some of the really sophisticated firms are going out to their partners, sub-consultants, general contractors, and getting feedback from them because they have great insights into what the leaders in your market are doing, and they'll tell you if you ask. So when you really open up this feedback system to include all of the project stakeholders, you maximize your opportunity to discover critical stuff early, to engage the right people in responding to those issues, and you maximize the number of successes you discover that you can learn from and teach and perpetuate. One suggestion for how you might do this, it might sound a bit daunting, it's actually pretty simple to do. Put together a plan. If it takes more than 1 page, it's probably too complicated. Here's an example. Find out when might you want to get feedback. What are some of the phases of work or key milestones or key events? What triggers those? What's the role of who should be asking for feedback? Is that a project manager? Is that a principal? Is it business development, a regional sales leader? Who do you need to get that feedback from? And develop some sets of questions that are relevant, concise, and timely for that particular event. It doesn't have to be complicated, and this plan doesn't have to be prescriptive. In fact, it should be a flexible, dynamic guide that suggests to you some great times to get feedback without being an onerous task to get in the way of getting the project done. It's also really worth pointing out that any successful feedback exchange should never replace the conversations you're already having with the client. This should be a supplement to the work you're doing and your existing communications, and great feedback should actually initiate the conversations you most need to have when you most need to have them. So think about this as an addition to rather than a replacement for, particularly when you consider any kind of electronic, online, paper survey, anything where you don't have human-to-human contact. Those are great, and they certainly help you get concise, objective data, but you want to always follow those up with additional human contact to make sure you are not making the relationship too automatic. So use these great automatic systems to collect data, but use your human processes to engage and really drive that experience. One short detour I want to take is to help you understand the feedback scale that has been used by the firms who are represented in this series of success stories. This answer scale becomes critical in many components. This is something we developed and patented in our research. Every question we ask is focused around this idea of meeting expectations. Rather than measuring satisfaction, everyone expects to be satisfied. We focus on meeting expectations. If you met expectations, they expected to be satisfied. It's a perfect fit. And you'll see a lot of scores of 4.0 met expectations. This forces the respondent to be active if they want to change the score. They either drag this up or drag it down. So when the scores are something other than 4.0, that was done with intent and purpose and really reveals to you relevant information. What you're going to see in the results later on, we'll start getting into some charts and graphs and analysis. You'll see a lot of very center-weighted data that represents much more of a bell curve than the typical 1 to 5, very satisfied, very unsatisfied method. So it's going to look a little bit different, but I'm confident you'll see the value in how this model creates more usable data. One final note before we start getting into the case studies. It's relevant, of course, to talk about the ways we ask for feedback. It's, of course, critical that we review the information. But the really savvy organizations are turning that feedback into action. They're actually using the data to make more strategic decisions, both at the global level, but also at the micro level. And you will find from time to time an item comes up that's really a unique thing for that one individual. And we encourage when an individual highlights something that they need done differently, follow up. Engage the client in an email, a phone call, a meeting. Take them to lunch. That attention shows your client's respect, turns you into their expert, and it builds lasting value. And what we've seen, what we've been able to measure in the last decade, is when you get feedback from those clients again after following up actively, the rate of low scores, the rate of problems is 83% lower than the control group who didn't do that follow-up. So it's a very effective way to bring measurable improvement to your relationships. We can give you a lot more information about this process. If you would like to learn more about that, please feel free to reach out to us. We have white papers, longer presentations about this element, but I wanted to give you enough of a framework to understand this is what the firms are doing who are represented in the case studies that are coming up. So to begin, I want to focus on one of our longest term clients. They're a 25-person architecture interiors firm. In 2013, they sent over 300 surveys with a 45% response rate, and their Net Promoter Score was a 79. Those of you who don't know much about Net Promoter Score, the average across all industries is about a 35. The target, what you look for high growth companies, is a 50. And the best companies in the world sit somewhere in the mid-70s. The worst companies, a cable company, some of the airlines, they're at negative 35. So 79 is really a remarkable score that there's a ton of research on showing this is truly a market-leading organization. And this is after 5 years of using the feedback system and feedback processes we just talked about. Since 2008, they've sent over 4,300 surveys. Now keep in mind, this is a 25-person company, but they've maintained a 50% response rate. When you do this well, and they're short and concise and they're actionable, your clients will remain engaged year after year after year. You won't burn them out if you're doing it well. And just as a good rule of thumb, what they found is the average employee sends surveys to about 3 people a month. And it's not prescriptive to the project. They really have more of an expectation that this is something everybody does. And we give them the freedom to choose when and how they get that feedback. Some of the interesting results we've seen: over 5 years, their rate of low scores dropped 76%. The average firm sees about 5 or 6% of their scores below met expectations, and this firm is sitting at 0.6%. And none of those scores were dramatically low. They're certainly getting a lot of feedback. It's not like they're hiding from anything, but they've really found over the course of the years all the little nuances of how to craft their service to meet the individual needs of each of their clients. Another interesting thing that came up, the scope and fees question was always the lowest scoring category. And this isn't asking, are we too expensive, but it really focuses in on how well does the scope that we provide match the fees that we're charging for it. So it's driving a bit more towards the value statement. And what we saw in 2012, their average score for scope and fees went up over 0.5 point, and it moved from last place to second place. So they took that information, implemented a 5% fee increase almost across the board, and ended 2013 with a 25% profit and a 4.9 multiplier. Because the clients told them, hey, the depressed economic conditions we've been in for the last couple of years have now corrected, and we're less focused on being as cost effective as possible. We're more focused on trying to get it done, and execution began to trump just the price. So they were able to see this, look ahead of it, and capitalize and turn that into real dollars. A side note, they didn't lose any clients in that process. Another exercise that they operate a couple times a year is they analyze their feedback information relative to other metrics. And this is another great way to learn how to take feedback and turn it into effective action. So in this case, what we see on the vertical axis is the feedback scale with met expectations in the middle. On the horizontal axis, we have the profitability with their average profit in the middle. And then each one of these dots, in this case, is one of their clients. So what you see over in the top right-hand corner, this expert corner, is where everything is working well. Feedback is really a great measure of the client's success. If the client says, you're giving me excellent to exceptional performance, they feel like they're getting more than they paid for. And the horizontal axis is really a measure of our success. Are we able to turn the work we're doing into lucrative projects? So all these clients in the top right corner, that's your win-win quadrant. We're making good margin. They feel like they're getting exceptional value. And those are the relationships we want to nurture, and we want to look for the commonalities there so we can market towards those types of clients. What makes a client in that quadrant? And if you look for a trend or a pattern and see, oh, that's mostly healthcare, well, maybe we need to spend more time marketing towards healthcare because we've found a way to do that well and deliver a great value. On the right-hand side, down towards the bottom, you might have what looks like some really good clients because they're really lucrative and profitable, but if the feedback is telling you they're not seeing the value for the prices that are being charged, there's a mismatch. And those clients, unless you find a way to increase the value of what you're delivering, are likely going to be looking for a lower cost provider to meet their needs. Those are really expensive clients to lose. So of course one option is to charge less. I don't think that's the right option. The the best option in most cases is figure out what you can do differently without adding a whole bunch of scope, but with the existing scope we have, how can we move some pieces around, maybe reassign some resources, and deliver a higher value outcome for them, and move those dots up. Top left quadrant, the potential. You might have some clients that you feel are just the dregs. We always lose money on them, or we just make 1 or 2%. But you know what? This dot in the very top left, they're telling you, you greatly exceed my expectations. Well, those expectations in many ways are based around the price they're paying. So do you have to reinvent how you're doing the work for them? No, they love the way you're doing the work. But you've got some information here to say, maybe it's worth looking at a fee increase, or maybe it's worth stopping the insanity of writing off all of these change orders. Maybe we need to be a little more bold and strong and sticking to our guns when it comes to change orders and scope creep, because they're telling us we're delivering more than they're paying for. And the bottom left, the analysis you might look at here is this a lose-lose situation? Do we just have a mismatch with the kind of services we provide and what they need? We just can't find a way to do that that's profitable for us and helpful for them? Okay. Maybe that's a client we don't need to pursue any more work with. If they really are just a terrible client and they're not nice to us and hard to work with, let's send them to a competitor. Let them lose money on them instead of us. But you know, it's so much harder to find a client than it is to keep one. In many cases, what you can do here is have some great conversations, and this is what this firm does, about, you know what, we want to find a way to provide exceptional value to you. What are some things we can do differently so that we're doing a great job for you? And you move those dots up first. And then when you've demonstrated and measured that success, now you start finding ways to incorporate that into your pricing strategies and move them to the right. So rather than firing what looks like a bad client, you might have a great client, you just don't understand what they need and how to get there. So drive those conversations and turn a bad client into a good one. There's some other interesting stories. I'm going to move on to a couple other firms at this point. I want to take a moment here to talk about the psychological influence of feedback. And this is a great book. If there's any marketers out there or anyone interested in marketing psychology, Robert Cialdini wrote a brilliant book called Influence. And it talks about the 6 key drivers of human behavior and how to influence them. So a few of the things we've found that is supported by Cialdini's research: positive feedback promotes consistent behavior that you desire. Cialdini found that people value consistency and they are influenced by consistency. They are influenced to be consistent. So when you get a client giving you positive feedback, there's a little psychological switch that happens that actually makes them act like the feedback they gave you. So if you've got a client who says you did a great job for them, and they go on record with a feedback response saying you were great, you know what's going to happen? They're going to start treating you like you're great, because if they tell you you're great but then turn around and treat you like you're not, they look inconsistent, and there's a cognitive dissonance that happens there, and they can't reconcile that internally. So it's fascinating how positive feedback can actually turn your clients into good clients. And you can get your clients to do the things you want them to do if you get them to give you some positive feedback on it. This also creates a great wealth of social evidence. Why do online reviews work? Why does everybody do that? Because if someone else is buying this widget, they must be like me, because I need the widget and they needed the widget and they bought the widget. So I'm going to impart my trust onto him temporarily because he's like me enough to say we both want this kind of a thing. And he says it worked for him, so I'll trust his judgment that it'll probably work for me. There's this great psychology of social evidence. Well, when you're getting feedback from clients and you're publishing the results, One, it shows that you actually have a system and you're doing something about this, which is very unique and different. But two, those results are actually influencing your potential clients to favor you better. It's all building your brand and increasing your stock price in the marketplace. I've got clients who have on their website published, last year we did 1,400 surveys, got 62% of them back, and you know what? They said that 98.6% of the time we met or exceeded their expectations. Boy, that's fantastic. You're really letting your clients talk for you. Never mind all of the testimonials and quotes and other great things that you'll gather with a good feedback system. So you can use this positive feedback and these social evidence elements to win more work and save challenging relationships. And that's what the point of this conversation is. Here's a story of a 50-person survey environmental firm. They began positioning in their proposals that, one, they had a feedback process. Two, here's what our other clients are saying about us. And three, to demonstrate that to you, we're going to get some feedback about our proposal before you make the selection. And they even do some work in government sector. And would you know the response rate to those surveys was the same as it is during the projects, but within 6 months they increased their shortlist success rate by 50%. It was a 5-minute change. 5 extra minutes on every proposal. They insert their cut sheet about their service quality assurance program, and they send a survey. And they increase their shortlist rate 50% in 6 months. And they're not the only firms who are reporting back that kind of success with this process. I've got another firm, a major, a global organization. They had a very challenging client that was very demanding. Their client had just laid off all of the internal engineers and outsourced it to my client. Well, the people that were left who didn't get outsourced were upset about the situation, and there was nothing my client could do to make them happy. It really was a case of hey, that's not fair. So they began measuring, and when they were asking the big question overall, how are things going, the results show all this red. All the red are the challenge areas that, hey, we don't like this paradigm of outsourcing. It wasn't really critical about the engineers. It was critical of the paradigm of outsourcing. So we began to measure the smaller things. Rather than measuring once a quarter overall how are things going, the actual project managers and engineers began getting feedback on individual task orders. They might spend 3 days working on something and deliver that to one of the facilities people and say, hey, how did this go? So instead of one survey going out to 75 people, it was one survey going out to one person. And that one person would look at it and say, well, yeah, this little thing we did, yeah, that worked well. And then a different project manager on a different little task would do something. And in the course of doing that 4 months, the next time they did one of the big global surveys, look what happened. Their rate of low scores dropped by half. And their rate of exceptional performance went from non-existent to 14%. A dramatic turnaround in just 4 months, just by asking for feedback in little ways. The net result of this, they got a 1-year, $17 million extension on the contract that they had already been told they were fired on. So that was a pretty dramatic 4-month turnaround. Here's another great example. A good client of mine. They've got a ton of fantastic feedback. Honestly, they are one of the leaders in the marketplace in a client service. And this is a nugget they found on one survey, and it was all filled with high scores and glowing reviews. But this one little comment came in. In general, it would be nice to have more of a presence on site from your personnel. So what did this engineering firm do? Well, they followed up. They took action. So they started sending a project manager on site to the client 2 or 3 times a week. Just kind of walking the hall, saying hi. This was a public Department of Transportation. Within 9 months, those visits, those chance encounters, bumping elbows, saying hi, led them to increase their revenue from that client from $10,000 a month to $30,000 a month. That's a $250,000 a year increase in revenue because they found this comment, and they never would have gotten it if they had asked. And keep in mind, this is a very satisfied client. But by giving them the forum to say, what else can we be doing, they discovered. It was hidden information. They didn't know. And if they had known this 2 years ago, they could have done this 2 years ago. And in that time had another $500,000 in revenue. So it's important to ask because you'll find these nuggets. They're out there. Everybody who does this will find something that's going to pay for the investment. Sometimes it's the little things. Here's an example of one designer at a small architecture interiors firm. Always got great feedback from her clients, and the first time she got a low score, the comment attached was, "I love your meeting minutes, but would you pick up the phone and call me?" So when she dug in to try to understand, well, we just had a meeting, and I go back to my desk and I type up the minutes and email them out. Why do we need to talk? Weren't we just in a meeting together? But come to find out, this guy was an extreme introvert, and his boss always dominated the conversations at the meetings. So this poor introvert just didn't have a chance to get his 2 cents in during these design meetings. So the designer, after each meeting, would get back to her desk, call, do a 5-10 minute conversation, get his information that was critical, and incorporate them into the notes. And look at the date. This was back in 2008. They're still working together. Very profitably. They've got a great relationship. Sometimes it's those little things that if you just ask, they'll never raise their voice. After all, the guy's an introvert. He's not going to magically come out of his shell and tell you he wants something done differently, but if you ask in a good way, you'll find those things, and that can have a really long-term lasting effect. Here's another great example. It's a ENR 100 AE firm. The first survey they sent out went to about 40 people. One of them was a key contact at a $5 million a year account. And there was a low score on the scope and fees question. And when they dug in, it was over a $3,000 change order. And they came into me and said, hey, what's this guy complaining about a $3,000 change order? It's a $5 million a year account. I mean, that's a drop in the bucket. Well, when we pushed in a little bit and understood the client's business process, well, he had the authority to develop the budget and get it approved at the beginning of their project cycle. Any changes to that, he had to go to his superior to get authorized. So that change order made him look like he wasn't managing the project. It made him look bad. And he was concerned about that. So when they talked with the client about a solution to avoid this kind of thing in the future, he said, oh, well, you know what? Why don't you increase your proposal to me by $100,000 in our next go-round and just set that money aside so if there are any of these change orders, we've got a bucket to go against. Well, that means if they don't use it, it's just extra profit they get to keep. One survey led to a client saying, hey, can you charge me an extra $100,000 that you might not have to spend? What a fantastic opportunity to really understand the problem here. The problem was not the change order. The problem was this client who didn't want to look bad in front of his superior, but he had access to budget to manage that more effectively. So it's just understanding each client's individual concerns. Whereas another client, if you tried to sneak in that $100,000, would have said, hey, you're making this too expensive. I'd rather take the risk of an unexpected change order and save the money. There's both kinds of clients out there and all kinds in between. And if you don't know which one is which, you're liable to stub your toe and leave some money on the table. And surveys don't do everything. Not everyone responds. The work we see, about 53% do respond, which is great. That's about 5 or 10 times the average for online surveys when you use these effective processes. But it's not going to work all the time. So I'm not in any way saying, hey, just do everything online and don't talk to your clients. And here's a great case in point. An E&R, a 200 firm on the West Coast, their first survey to a particular client, he did not respond to the survey, but he replied to the email and said, hey, can we go to lunch and talk? Great. That's even better, right? Let's go actually get in front of our client and talk to him. And over the course of lunch, breaking some bread, they were talking about what's going on. And though this was a public university that traditionally sent all of their projects to bid, they were able to talk through a few of the unique challenges, and the client was a single sourced for 2 new projects, each valued over $100,000. And this conversation started because they asked, is there anything we can be doing better? What a great opportunity to initiate one of those necessary conversations. A healthcare architectural firm that we work with, there are about 75 people in size. They were working with one of their key anchor clients, and it was a fairly new client, but a huge opportunity for the long term. And the first survey they sent to the executive decision maker at this client, the results just came back brutal. There was 1 score of met expectations. Everything else was low, including an unacceptable. Look at this comment here. Your shortfalls in your design cause us to go over budget to correct your mistakes. As a touted healthcare architectural firm, not very attentive to healthcare needs and requirements. Brutal. So the president of the architecture company called the client and said, hey, you know what? Really, really sorry to hear things didn't go well. I'm honestly quite surprised. Can we talk about this a bit more? And come to find out, the decision maker at this hospital had the architecture firm confused with another firm that he was working with on a different project. What this allowed the architect to do is say, oh, wow, okay, well, one, I'm glad we cleared that up and didn't tarnish our reputation, but he was savvy enough to say, okay, let's talk about our project. Oh yeah, your project's going great. You guys have really been good to work with. Sorry, I got confused. Well, good. Is there anything we can help with on that other project? And they were actually engaged to help get the other project back on track. So not only did they save their brand, but they were able to drive some additional revenue by helping out. Great opportunity to sometimes you don't know what your clients don't know. And boy, if they're confused about who you are and who your biggest competitor is, that can be a very challenging situation. Here is a 25-person residential site survey. They had this great aha moment. Back after the real estate bubble burst, of course, subdivisions stopped growing every other day. So that whole bit of work just really evaporated. And this firm had downsized quite dramatically from 80 people to 25 people in just a few months. And you see here, this guy, Chris, he's a project manager. What this is showing you, the dark bar is the average score. Dark blue is the range of 25th to 75th percentile. And the light gray is the range of minimum to maximum. So this is a look of all the feedback collected by their group of project managers. And in looking at Chris's feedback, it's so above and beyond everyone else's. It's like, wow, what's going on with Chris? What does his profitability look like? And there's kind of silence in the room. It's about 2%. And everyone else was sitting at decent margins, 8 to 12%. So say, hey, do you think Chris knows this information about what his clients say about him compared to the rest of the organization? And so the director of this site survey firm showed Chris this chart and said, hey, Chris, it looks like you might be giving your work away. And they had a conversation, well, yeah, my clients aren't giving me as much work, so I'm not charging as much because I don't want to lose it. Well, Chris, are they giving the work to somebody else? No. They just have less work to give. So why are you cutting your fees to compete against someone you're not actually competing against? You're competing against a market reality where there's just less work to give. They're not giving the work to someone else. And it was this aha moment for Chris that, oh, just because there's less work to give me doesn't mean I have to lower my fees. If they were giving work to a competitor and perhaps there's some price competition, we can talk about adding value, reducing fees, all those things. But this wasn't one of those cases. So this brought that to light. And in 6 months, Chris brought his profitability from 2% to 18%. And you know, oftentimes when you look at a chart like this, your instinct is to applaud someone like Chris and go figure out what's wrong with Dan. But would you know that in this case, Dan was their most profitable project manager consistently? When you go out and buy a Cadillac, don't you expect more of the car than if you go out and buy the Chevy? So what's happening is not that Dan is underperforming in any way. In fact, what we've often seen is that the best performers are really the best because they set the bar so high and they hit it so consistently and they manage expectations well. And when you do those things, you can charge for the value that creates. And if you're setting high expectations and you live up to them, you're going to actually end up in these results meeting expectations. You set the bar high and you met that objective. So this really turns that model around in what you look for and what your reaction is to it. Well, good. It looks like I am about 2 minutes ahead of schedule. So I have put a note on the screen to start asking your questions now. There is a question or chat box in your GoToMeeting. If you can't see the GoToMeeting control panel, on the top right of your screen, there should be a little vertical bar with a left-hand arrow which will fly out the control panel. So please begin formulating your questions. And while you guys are doing that, I'm going to quickly review 10 keys to effective feedback communication. 1, make it comfortable. Ask questions that are easy to answer and that your clients will want to answer. Don't ask questions about people and personalities that might be awkward. Really try to keep it simple. Before you develop any system, begin with the end in mind. Design some management reports. What information do you need to see at the leadership level in order to be able to take effective action and be very strategic in your decisions? Think about how you want the information presented and work your way backwards from there. Stay focused on the process. People are hard to change. Personalities are hard to change. If you focus on the process of the interaction between your staff and your clients, processes are a lot easier to optimize and change and tweak, and you can develop a unique process for each client. Good. I see some questions coming in. Please keep them coming. Focus more on determining clients' expectations rather than satisfaction. Satisfaction is not enough. You need to understand the expectations and make sure you meet them. Ask questions in a way that will help minimize your liability and drive down risk. Look for opportunities to fix things while they're small. Start early. Measure often. The sooner you find out there's a problem, the sooner you can fix it. The more often you're keeping a pulse on what's going on, the better chance you have of staying in sync with your client. Implement a tracking system. How do you make sure it's getting done? How do you make sure people are taking action on the results? Get a good tracking system in play to really follow that through. Where possible, respond to clients instantly. What we've found over the last decade is responsiveness is consistently the client's #1 hot button item. So when a client takes the time to give you some feedback, respect his time by responding to it quickly. Don't let it sit in a management report for a month. Keep it short. Less is more. You will get more information with multiple short surveys than you will with one long survey. 6 to 8 questions. A good question is usually 12 words or less. Your clients aren't going to read it much more carefully than that anyway. Again, you're not trying to figure everything out. You're trying to figure out where you need to have the conversation. So short, simple, and do it more often, you will actually get more data than if you do longer surveys that are less often. And it's so easy to do all these things when you collect electronically, but don't ever lose your focus on the personal touch when it comes to conversation and resolution. Hopefully those 10 tips help you guys on your way towards accomplishing and achieving some of the same results you just saw from your peers. Let's see, a couple of questions here. How often do you recommend electronically surveying any one individual? Great question. Your mileage will vary. Different people have different tolerance for this. What I've seen in the research is people respond about half the time, and they have a tolerance to respond about every 3 months. So if you send approximately 8 a year and you let them off the hook up front saying, hey, I might ask a bit more often than you want, but they're short, they're easy, and when you have something to say, let us know. That's a pretty good way to set that expectation. I would certainly say at least once a quarter, again, assuming they are short, simple surveys. If you've got some 30-question monstrosity that takes 25 minutes to complete, you can't do that very often. That's more of a once-a-year kind of thing. But I would encourage you, if you've got 30 questions, break it up into 4 different surveys, and then cycle those once a quarter. If you don't have any feedback program right now, where do you start? That's a great question. Let me throw this up here. Answer is that client feedback tool. That's going to go to me and a few of the experts on my team. We can certainly point you in the right direction. Our business is helping clients get started with feedback. We can certainly help you. There's a lot of ways to skin that cat. So if our approach isn't what you're looking for, we have some great partners that do all kinds of other feedback programs, and we can connect you with the appropriate resources. So tell us a little bit more about you and what you're trying to accomplish, and we'll help you get started. How do you get the project managers on board with it? That is a fantastic question. Project managers love to say that they are too busy, and we can look at that objectively and say you're never too busy to talk to your clients. But there is definitely an educational process. Sharing some of these stories is a great way to let project managers see the purpose and the method for why we do that. Sometimes getting feedback might feel a bit like doing a timesheet. It's one of those things that you just do because you know you need to do it, and the results are there. The other way is keep it simple. Whatever process you put in play, it can't take more than a few minutes a month. My target is an actively engaged project manager deep in the feedback process. We should automate that to where it takes no more than 5 minutes a month. You can probably get them to get on board with 5 minutes a month to take care of their clients. Do you recommend offering confidential surveys to respondents? You know, that's another fascinating question. We've actually found, and I don't have this a slide in this presentation, but we've found, one, you can't take direct action on a confidential survey. So there's this subconscious thought by the client taking it, well, if they don't know who I am, what's the point? Why bother? It's not like they can do anything about it. I'm just going to be a number in the stack of paper somewhere. So there's this intuitive understanding that a confidential doesn't really work. 2, no one believes in confidentiality these days anyway. There's always ways to game the system, and you can figure it out. So let's be very direct about it and keep it above board, keep everybody's name on it. The side benefit of not being confidential is it forces a modicum of decency in the feedback, and some of the useless rage or foul words that you often see in the anonymous online reviews doesn't come through. Kind of on a whim a few weeks ago, we surveyed our database, and in over 50,000 of these feedback exchanges, there was not one 4-letter word. So that shows you how you can keep this very professional and yet effective. But the data also shows we have done some confidential surveys as a baseline, as a test, as a control, and they get 1/3 as many low scores and 1/5 as many open-ended comments. And while fewer low scores might seem appealing to begin with, what that really shows is they're not being honest with us. They're not telling us the critical information we need. Do we have a sample questionnaire that you can share? Oh, that's a great question. Leads into one of my closing points. Those of you who did attend today, I will be sending each of you a feedback request that follows these basic principles to get feedback about our session today. So please look for that. It should be in your inbox in the next couple of hours. And know that when you respond, I'll get the results immediately, as will some people on my team. And we will take the initiative and respond back to you to really show you how that process can be simple, time effective, and beneficial for everyone. Let's see, a couple comments here. Can we have a copy of the PowerPoint? Great webinar. Can we print off the slides? Can we access the webinar slides later for a quick reference? All great questions. Those of you who would like it, please email answers@clientfeedbacktool.com, and we will be posting a recording of this webinar for easy sharing, and we can make the information contained in these slides available to those who are interested as well. So please do ask, and we'll get that information to you, and we will be sending all of you a link. So I don't see any other questions coming in. I know you guys are all disappointed that we finished 7 minutes early. That was a lot of information to cover in a very short amount of time. I hope you had the opportunity to process and take good action on it. Please do look for the feedback request coming soon. As you can imagine, we love this stuff and do value your feedback. Any questions or requests for more information, email answers@clientfeedbacktool.com, or you can make the request directly in your feedback response. We will be reading all of those and responding accordingly. Again, thank you all very much, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day.